Yeah, so this time we're talking about A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas, one of our favorite authors. And this is book 4 in a 7-book series. It's kind of hard. There's the first 3, this is a trilogy, this is a novella, and then there's books after that on different characters. Kelly recently finished this book, so she's going to kick us off with a synopsis.
So this one is basically covers the aftermath of the war with Hybern. Okay, so there's the big war in the other book. War's over, it ends, and then this book is just like, how do you pick up the pieces, how they go through their day-to-day life. Nothing like really major. There's not another war in this one. It's basically just them healing, and they're like trying to figure out how the world is going to work now since the wall's gone, and humans are essentially, the human lands can mix with the
Fae.
Is it all Fae? Yeah, Alarian, all the other people with powers and stuff. And before they couldn't, and then now they're redoing their ally forces and like who's against who, and they're essentially picking teams now. Mm-hmm. So that's basically it.
It's kind of an intermission book to just tie you over to the next one, but tell you, it does reveal some important things, but it's a very quick read. It's
a very quick read. However, it took me the longest out of all of them.
It's like 220 pages. It's kind of like a sprinkle of information.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I thought it was a nice break after all this like drama with the war and like all this craziness, and then you kind of have this like book that it's a little bit like lighter and happier, and it's just kind of like about winter solstice and like
not so dramatic.
Yeah.
It's a nice, it's like a breather. Like no one's actively trying to kill anybody in this one.
So I don't know if Steve's ever heard of the Court series.
No.
I know. I kind of just want him to, I want to be like, read this page to this page and film your face.
This is so nice as this like first reaction of
the Court. It's a little confusing with like all the, there's so many books going on, and I got there's a trilogy and then there's like 4 afterwards or something. I don't, it seems like quite a...
We can send you a link to our other videos.
So I'll give you a quick recap of the first 3 books. Okay, everyone can chime in because it's been a bit since I read them. There is this normal girl, and then she had to go to this Fae land because of she basically broke the law, and she had to go to the Fae land and live with this prince. Think of like kind of like Beauty and the Beast. She gets wrapped into this world and has to go basically try and save this prince's life because they ended up falling in love. She's just a normal person, and so she went to try to fight for him and ended up dying, and they brought her back. Then the guy she went to go do all this for turns out to be a big old jerk, very protective and major douchebag. She's hanging on by a thread, like she's basically starving, having these nightmares, like psychologically not in a good place. Then enters Reese, and he is originally seen as the villain in the story of this kind of like mysterious but bad person, and he comes in and ends up saving her. Then they end up falling in love, but he's like, how would you describe him? He's not Batman. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
He's supposed to be Hades.
Oh, okay, Hades.
He has wings, and
he has wings, but he also like makes cat noises.
He does too.
Like there's a lot of purring going on, and feline looks.
Yeah,
I think it's crazy how they, like in the first books, they totally have you convinced that this one guy Tamlin is like the good guy, like perfect, like wonderful. And then it turns out that you've just been like overlooking all these red flags because there's so much other things going on. And because she seems to really like him, and then it all just like escalates in like the first half of the second book, and you're like, oh my god, I was so wrong. He's a jerk. I hate him.
Tamlin's terrible, but you originally really like him. It's very deceiving. And so while all this is going on, she's also fighting against Hybern, who is trying to kill her in a sense.
They're trying to
Take
take
over
over
the
like the
world.
whole
Take over the world.
world.
Yeah. So then she starts working with Reese, and they're he has like a group of friends too, are a really pivotal part, and they start working to defeat Hybern, and then there's this big war, and people die, people get brought back to life, and then that's the end of the third book, and then there's this book, A Quarter Across
Also,
Starlight, that ties you over to the next big thing.
I want you to remember during all this, there's a lot of magic and like creepy, like demons, and also a lot of inappropriate graphic sex
Lots
Kelly.
between a lot of people.
Lots of that. It starts off as like a YA series and then escalates to be like adult fantasy for sure.
Yeah, it escalates to the point where like no one knows what you're reading, but you're like kind of embarrassed. Like kind of uncomfortable. You're like, I shouldn't be reading this.
I had a realtor come over to my house recently, and she saw the bookshelf, and she's like, "Oh, I love some of these series. What's this court series?" She took a picture of it to read later, and I was just sitting there horrified. Like, she's gonna go home and either A, Google this, or B, start reading and think, "Oh, it's such a great story," and then halfway through be like, "Oh my gosh, what is Madeline into?"
No, and then like the first one, I'm like, all right, I get you have to throw some of that in here. And then the second one, I'm like, okay. And then it just keeps going, but you're already hooked on the storyline. So you're like, oh, well, now I gotta live through this weird.
Didn't you recommend this series to like your boss's daughter before you knew it was like super graphic?
I did. And like, she's like 17. So, but I don't know. I don't have a 17-year-old, and you know, I don't know where I land. I don't know if that's normal for them to read. I don't know what they're watching. Like I'm like, I don't want to be the one, but I did it, and I still have a job, so
That's good.
17-year-olds know what sex is. I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, this is like super graphic, and like they're part animals sometimes. I don't know. It just seems like something you shouldn't recommend without maybe knowing more about the series, or without your cousins giving you a heads up. And also maybe just for legality purposes, don't recommend it for anybody under the age of 18, just to play it safe. Unless you have like children and you know more than I do whatever you want. But I was like, I recommended it, and then like 2 days later I'm like in the thick of it, and I was like, oh my god, what did I do?
Let's do a quick like super quick rating. Like, I'll just kind of like spitfire. So I rated this an A because I thought it was a great book that tied you over to the next one, written well, and provided information without being boring. Kelly?
I'll give it like a B. It should have been a quick read. However, there wasn't a ton going on, and there was like a lot of like emotional talk and healing, just not for me. So I'm more like, let's just get to the war and, you know, not talk this out. But I think it's a great breather and like a break, and it's short enough to be a break.
Anne?
I'll give it a B plus. It was probably my fourth favorite of the 5, so Mr. and Fury was definitely my favorite. But yeah, not a lot happens. You just find out some information, and they kind of like celebrate their version of Christmas. It's nothing like crazy happens where you're like, oh my god, I have to read this right away. You know, but yeah, I liked it.
Liz?
I gave it an A. I think every book in the series is an A. It's amazing, but it is my least favorite out of all of them. There's just not a lot. But I think you need it for the story. You can't skip it. So.
For sure.
Right. I'd agree.
Steve, what are your initial thoughts on the world of the court series?
Sounds kind of like Game of Thrones to me, although it probably isn't in real life, but seems like a good read based on your feedback, and I look forward to reading it someday.
Will you actually read it?
No, absolutely not.
It was worth a try.
I look forward to reading it someday. No.
Supposed to smile and pretend to be interested.
We appreciate you nonetheless.
The effort's appreciated.
All right. Well, there you have it. A Course of Frost and Starlight. Go read it. After you read the first 3.
Mhm.
Woohoo.